Welcome. Welcome, everybody, to Show Up Chicago. We're a community gathering and political panel show presented monthly here at the Hideout. I am Tom Moss, and this is Marge Halpern. We're part of the leadership team at Indivisible Blue Beginning. Normally, we'll have about an hour-long talk, and then we'll have about 30 minutes of Q&A afterwards. You might have noticed the setup back here. This is not for Marge and I to do our folk act. We'll be doing that next Friday. But we will have a hard stop at 8 o'clock tonight. So we'll do our Q&A out in the bar, okay? So just a forewarning that we're going to have to kind of clear out right after we're done up here. So, getting to the matter at hand. Who's on your ballot? How has this election entered uncharted territory? What's at stake? And is anyone up here willing to break out their crystal balls? We shall see. On this Illinois primary eve, we've recruited two of our favorite panelists to address these questions and more.
So, to my right is Pete Giangreco, a Chicago-based Democratic political consultant who has worked on, let's say, countless state, local, and national races, clients including Amy Klobuchar, Barack Obama, Rahm Emanuel, Tammy Duckworth. You've probably heard of most of them. Brandon Pope is an Emmy Award-winning Chicago journalist, television host, and podcaster whose reporting has been featured on the CW26 Chicago, WBEZ, WGN, WVON, the Chicago Sun-Times, and joins me on the WGN podcast, Mincing Rascals. Thank you both for joining us tonight for the final conversation analyzing tomorrow's primary. There'll be pre-primary conversation. There will be many post-primary analyses.
Dun, dun, dun.
Right? Yeah, right.
Thanks for having us.
We're going to break the evening into two parts, basically. We're going to talk about some bigger, financial issues to start with, and then kind of look at some of the races one by one. But first, let's talk about money. It does seem that the power of money may be decreasingly a concern for voters, and I mean in terms of Pritzker giving Stratton $5 million for her campaign, which may or may not be, I guess that's the question at hand, may or may not be affecting the race as much as it might have in the past. So let's start there with the role of that kind of contribution. We're going to talk about dark money here in a minute with PACs, but let's talk first about the role of that kind of influx of cash into these campaigns. How do you read that?
And just to specify a little more, these are individual donations. We used to be horrified. So-and-so gave $5 million. Now we're like, oh, of course he did. It's his lieutenant governor. Of course he gave her money. Are we that ho-hum about out in the open declared donations versus the dark money we'll talk about later?
Well, I mean, what it is outsourcing your candidacy, right? Because you have an independent expenditure. There's all kinds of signaling that's like third base coaches. Like you do these red boxes on the website. And they say, oh, we would like this and we'd like that. And lo and behold, a TV ad comes out that sounds just like what's in the red box. So there is sort of an outsourcing of the campaign. I think Joe Biden essentially won the Democratic nomination in 2020. He outsourced his campaign to a super PAC. And that's how he, after finishing fourth or fifth in Iowa and out of the money in New Hampshire, was allowed to, could stick around, because most presidential campaigns fold when they run out of money. But he had millions and millions of dollars in a super PAC. It kind of ended the sort of, oh my God, isn't that awful? Everybody sort of accepted it. And now you've got Juliana Stratton, who got elected state rep as a Madigan candidate, wholly owned subsidiary, served about a half a term, became lieutenant governor, not running her own campaign, didn't have much of an issue portfolio as lieutenant governor, and now has outsourced her campaign to a super PAC. And it's hard to not look at that and say, there's no there.
So it's not the individual donations of a Pritzker or some other deep pocket. It's that PAC money that we're focusing on, the dark money.
I do think the money from Pritzker has raised, with that race in particular, a lot of debate, friction, and conversation, especially amongst folks I talk to on the black elected side, especially congressional black caucus side. We've seen, you may have seen stories already that have been reported out, including some of my reporting about how members of the congressional black caucus nationally are very upset with J.B. Pritzker and have basically issued a warning to him saying, hey man, this is how you're going to play it. Don't expect our support in 2028. Now, that can change. We all have seen these rifts happen over time between the CBC and major candidates. Heck, Barack Obama had a beef with some CBC members. Him and Maxine Waters weren't cool for a little bit, right, when he first came in office. Those things can be repaired, but if Juliana Stratton doesn't win, it starts to be your first major blow to J.B. Pritzker's kind of 2028 chances and overall the aura around his political machine. He's had a run so far where hasn't had a lot of controversies, right? Hasn't had a lot of losses, so aside from the graduated income tax. This might be a stain.
Which got pounded, by the
It
way.
got pummeled. It was a big loss. Probably one of the only things you could probably point to, but this one right here would be a big one for him, reputationally, especially for those 2028 ambitions. So I think the Juliana Stratton conversation gets kind of looped in with that because many feel this injection of money is sketchy and unearned, even though from standard political practice, it's his lieutenant governor. He's a billionaire. You'd be kind of weird if he didn't give her money,
Wouldn't
right?
a lot of black community leaders be angry if you don't support the black woman?
There
who's
would be
been
a
at your
lot
side
of
the whole
angst.
time?
There'd be a
I
lot
would
of
be
angst,
angry as
yeah.
a woman.
Well, I
whether
saw-
I vote for her or not.
I saw a story today that maybe you'll dispute, that Pritzker wins even if Stratton loses because he has endorsed a black woman. But you're saying that's not the case.
No.
That's not my, I didn't, I
No.
read that. I didn't.
I mean, don't back no losers, right? Isn't that an old Chicago term? Reagan knows it. But yeah, because if Juliana Stratton had her own political set of accomplishments, it would be a different story. But essentially, you look at all of the major Pritzker legislative accomplishments. Cam Buckner ran most of the criminal justice reform. Toy Hutchison was behind marijuana legalization. Nikki Budzinski drove the minimum wage. Christian Mitchell drove the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act. Those are the four biggest accomplishments of the Pritzker administration. What did Juliana Stratton do? Yeah, she sort of put her name on some of the reproductive rights stuff, but how many votes did she get for it? Kind of none. So I think when you're entirely a wholly owned subsidiary of Pritzker Incorporated, if you lose, Pritzker Incorporated loses.
The timing would not be good for him if he
If
loses
she had
the
a
race
separate
right now.
record, then you could make more of a.
Right,
but
but
she
it
doesn't.
seems, and he backed her right out of the box. He put
A half
more
a
than
term
his
of state
money
rep.
on her. Yeah,
Was-
right.
was-
Mhm.
I mean, separately outside of that, I just don't for the life of me understand if I had like $1 billion or $1 million, why would I give it to a political campaign? It's like really weird gambling. I don't know. Like people have gambling problems though, so I guess it could be
Do
a
you
thing.
want to be
but-
president though, Brandon?
Absolutely not. I don't want that job.
And how important is the now that we're fully in the age of oligarchs, how much does it matter the stink of the oligarch in question? So, Pritzker's popular and, Stratton may not win, but she's not going to lose because of her endorsement, Pritzker's endorsement. That was not the case, for example, in the Wisconsin Supreme Court situation. The stink of Elon Musk probably hurt his candidate.
No question. In fact, Justice Crawford is a client of ours. And my partner, Aviva Bowen, just won a bunch of Poly Awards because of all the advertising we did to make Elon Musk. They literally had a piece where there was a picture of the Wisconsin Supreme Court bench with Elon Musk sitting at it. Do you want Elon Musk to be your state Supreme Court? He was the entire campaign. Towards the end. And, the Democratic Party of Wisconsin is flat out the best state party in the country on either side. It's people powered. They raise a ton of money. They get everybody from Illinois to drive up. They do an amazing job. So they keep winning these April Supreme Court justice races. And that, when you look at Wisconsin versus North Carolina, two very purple states, the difference between them is in North Carolina, there's a Republican machine, and they won the state Supreme Court. They redrew the legislative lines. They redrew the congressional lines, and now we lost the entire Republican majority in the House is because the Republican Party in North Carolina seized control of the state Supreme Court, redrew the lines. Those are your 3 seats. They're all there just from doing this with a crayon.
Or a Sharpie.
You've got a purple state that's a toss-up state that has veto-proof majorities in both houses in the legislature. And that's the difference between Wisconsin, which is now going to have a Democratic majority in both, and not off a Democratic map, just off a fair map. Will probably take the Assembly and the Senate this year. You have control of the state. That's what, like, grassroots organizing. It can't always be about money. There's got to be every element of a campaign. They do it in Wisconsin. We haven't been able to do it in North Carolina.
Well, that's the damn thing. A fair map is a Democratic map.
Well, it's small d or big D.
Yeah, right.
I mean, what we have in
I
Illinois,
contend
the
maybe both.
Illinois congressional map is a big D.
Well, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's gerrymandered. God bless us. You got to fight fire with fire. But the Wisconsin map is something the Republicans signed off on. If you had a computer draw it, it would look kind of like the map in Wisconsin.
Right.
And so you have some seats where you can fight and win.
It sounds like part of the question here too is like, how do voters weigh on the question of can there be an ethical billionaire? Elon Musk, ugh. Right? But for Democratic voters, the things that J.B. Pritzker supports with his money, the causes he supported with his money, all across the country, not just in the state, people might be like, you know what? If he's got it, he's using it, right? But that's going to be the ultimate test for him in 2028 long term. And I think for people in the future as well. What billionaires are we going to tolerate, right? We tolerate Beyonce if she contributes to a campaign. She's stinking rich. But are we going to tolerate somebody else? I think it comes down to who's doing the donation and what their political kind of like, what's the word? Well, what the taste profile is for people around that particular person donating.
So when it comes to PACs, it's
That's
a
different.
little different question, which you threw out already. And I want to back up just a little bit because you mentioned red boxing, and I want to be sure people know about this. Honestly, I didn't know about it until this cycle is the first time I realized. And I'll thank our friend Marie Newman for doing a whole Substack about it and filling me in and a lot of other people. So what happens is when there is a super PAC, they are not allowed to coordinate with the candidate. When you see an ad that says, Juliana Stratton took $5 million from so-and-so, PAC. They don't give her the money. You think, why don't you refuse that money? They don't give her the money. They spend it in a way that they think will benefit her campaign, or if they want to help her, or they do it in a way that hurts opponents if there's people they don't want to win. The way they coordinate, though, is on their website. When you look at issues content, and it may be buried, so you have to sometimes look carefully, there's a thin red line around the key talking points that they want super PACs to address. So it's, I'm not going to coordinate with you, but if you know to look for the red box, you know that's what your ad should be about, and that's what will help me. So we as voters should be looking for who does a red box. On the other hand, Marie's point was sort of like, so if they do red box, they want to coordinate with PACs. Well, if a PAC is putting money out there, you don't want them to waste it on the wrong topic. So I'm not exactly faulting a candidate who has a red box, but you should be aware that there is a way that they signal with the wink to the PAC. So,
Well, and they
right?
not only signal what to say, they signal how to say it
Yeah.
and who to say it to.
The talking
So you'll
points.
see a red box will say progressive voters need to, a lot of voters in the 9th Congressional District, like 94,000 of them, need to hear, and it'll say, or they'll even say, need to see it on television, read it on their phone, and get it in their mailbox. They're literally,
Yeah.
you can do this
Take a
all
look at
legally.
what they say.
They'll just and then you sit, and I've been on both sides of this, right? Where you sit on the candidate side and you write your red box and you're like, I got to keep this simple so they don't screw it up. And then you sit there and you cross your fingers that they don't screw it up.
And then you see the ad.
And then you see the ad and you're like,
that either is
Okay,
what I
that's
wanted or
okay.
it's
Yeah.
not. So our job as voters is not just to watch TV ads or just to turn off the TV, but when you see the ad, look at the bottom and see who paid for it. Then go to the internet and look them up and find out who they are, because the name of the PAC will not tell you who they are. I'm in the 7th District, and there are a whole lot of ads there by Fair Shake. Who doesn't want a fair shake? That sounds pretty good. Well, who really wants a fair shake are the crypto interests, and that's who runs those ads. So if I see Fair Shake identifying a friend, they're not a friend of mine.
Shake down, am I right?
That's right. That's right. Or my favorite is, well, there are a lot of APAC. APAC doesn't just say funded by the APAC Super PAC. They have many, many more. There is the Elect Democratic Women Action Fund, which was formed to support pro-choice women running for Congress. They happen to endorse some who are funded by APAC. So you have to decide, does that disqualify, or because the Elect Democratic Women Action Fund likes them, maybe you will too if you agree. But don't confuse that with the Elect Chicago Women PAC, which is directly tied to APAC. So you really are not, to me, a responsible voter needs to look at those ads carefully, write down the names of the PAC, of the sponsor, look them up, and decide. Ultimately, it comes down to maybe the enemy of your enemy is your friend, and that might be who you decide to vote for. I've never voted like that before, but I think I am tomorrow. How deeply are these ads really impacting our votes?
They have incredible impact. I mean, I think in the 7th District, if I were betting money, I would probably bet on Melissa Conyers-Irvin to win. She's not a client of ours. We got somebody else in that race. But she has had a ton of spending by APAC in some nice TV ads that if you just aren't paying attention and don't look at the bottom line, you'd watch them and say, oh, I like her. And I think that's the way most voters are. Now, primary voters are a little more high information. They do look stuff up online. General election voters, the swing ones, the ones that actually decide the elections, hate politics. They don't watch the news. They feel like they have to vote. They usually hold their nose and vote for the lesser of two evils, and they're like allergic to political information. Primary voters are exactly the opposite. They love some direct mail. They want to read everything. They want to go online. They want to look at things. So you got to be one of those high information voters, as you said.
Yeah, and not only is Conyers-Irvin getting the benefit of friendly ads from APAC, but she's getting the benefit of the unfriendly ads from the crypto folks at Fair Shake, who are trying to tear down LaShawn Ford, who appears to be her main contender in a field of 13.
Yeah, and it's not just the TV ads, right? You have this new thing that's kind of gone unchecked, a new wilderness in a sense of the digital side with influencers, people who are literally given a script, and they say the script almost directly, or they take certain lines from the direct script, and come off as, oh, I'm an informed voter. I just think you as an informed voter should be aware of so-and-so and so-and-so. Make your decision, but this candidate, this. And there's been tons of things going around social media about this. The scripts are going around from these super PACs. And influencers are getting called out because they're getting paid $1,500 here, $3,000 there, $5,000 there. And because of the Supreme Court and how the Supreme Court has really opened the floodgates here, there's really no regulation of that. And we're seeing Illinois become this like really weird tinderbox test case for what we could see down the line across the country with all this money infused in. And that digital side is where I think is the most dangerous, because obviously TV ads still have some power. And when you talk about like you're on your phone, you're scrolling through, and you get it, I've got it in all kinds where it's like, whoa.
You don't know they're paid.
You don't know they're paid.
They don't declare.
They don't declare they're paid. They're not obligated to declare they're paid at all, but they are. And that becomes a real issue for ethics, for our elections, all across the board. Who is paying them becomes a bigger, how do you track that? There's just so many issues we got to follow when it comes to that. And we're seeing Illinois really just show exactly what that problem is because of the Supreme Court's decision.
And I would quote Pete, who noted in an interview with Politico Illinois that Illinois is now getting what the swing states have been getting forever, or we're getting more and more of it.
Absolutely.
And this is our first taste of it. And the quote that I love is, if I can quote you directly, Pete says, this is completely nuts.
I mean, look, big money has always played in Illinois, right? And, you know, I've been doing this for 30, 40 years, right? I'm not, you know, new to this. You know, I've certainly had clients who spent money this way, right? But it is so distorted this time around in a way that you can go run for office, you can have an impeccable resume, you can raise a good chunk of money, you can have a really good message, and some super PAC can just come in and blow the race away. And what that does is makes it even harder. Like, it's already hard enough to get good candidates to run. Honestly, this is the weakest U.S. Senate field. I've been here since 1989. This is the worst chunk of candidates I've ever seen. So it's already hard enough to get good people to run for the U.S. Senate, or even for state rep, or alderman. I should say city council member. But this kind of thing where you do everything right, you run a good campaign, you've had the background, you've actually invested time, you've gotten things done, and it doesn't matter if some crypto or AI or APAC or pick your interest group that's well funded just can come in and just blow it all away. It's like, why would you run?
Well, because the candidates are now puppets being run by PACs, dark money, billionaires. It's their election. It's not really the candidates themselves. And that is so alarming to see. So alarming.
Is it that new? I mean, candidates have always been bought and sold along the way, but is it now who's doing the buying and selling?
Not like this, where
It's a
literally a narrow interest that only cares about crypto or only cares about AI or only cares about Israel, and it becomes a transactional thing. If they've got hundreds of millions of dollars, it doesn't matter how many $25 and $50, like the Bernie Sanders way of raising money, it doesn't matter how much you have, because they just can, if they want the seat, they're going to spend it. So you have two choices. Either you just run and see if there's a way that you can, you know, Daniel Biss might be able to be the example of somebody who beats APAC this time around, who is my client. Or
To be
you
clear,
just
Daniel
go and
Biss,
not
APAC.
What's that?
Daniel Biss is your client.
Yes, not APAC, no. So
I did
it's
this
like,
one.
you can put yourself out there, and like, these things aren't fun. You know, you get yelled at, your supporters get, you know, horrible things said to them at the door. These things are not easy things to do. So like, why would you put yourself out there unless somebody, and then the other side of the coin is you can go and run a terrible race and have a horrible resume and, you know, maybe have some petty corruption stuff on the backside, and you could win just because somebody comes along and through not because of your brilliance or your message or anything you have done, you just happen to be the candidate they want to beat somebody else.
You know what intrigues me most about what we're going to see tomorrow, what I'm going to watch for? APAC has been a heavy talking point, more than I ever imagined, in these local races. And I like to think that, like, on a local level, people care more about the bread and butter local issues, which is, I think, still the case. But every forum I've moderated, every forum that I've been to, and every forum I've seen, the APAC conversation comes up. And it's not coming up just from the moderator. It's coming up from the people in attendance. It's coming up from the voters. It's coming up from people my age, millennials, who are now a wider voting bloc than people want to give credit for and are making active decisions. And I just wonder, how much do voters care about whether APAC is backing somebody or not? How toxic is the brand of APAC? Is it toxic at all? That's going to spell a lot of things out locally for Illinois and the future there, but also around the country when it comes to APAC and this conversation around Israel and relations with Israel and the U.S. relations with that. And more in a way than crypto and AI, I think. I mean, those are still kind of like controversial issues, but they're issues that people aren't really seem to be sophisticatedly knowledgeable about yet, right? Whereas APAC seems like one that's animating people in a way that I did not expect on a local level to this degree.
I want to ask a chicken and the egg question. So you talked about how the advertising is being very narrow casted on very narrow topics. Is it that, are we being led by the PACs, or are voters choosing candidates based on very narrow litmus tests in a way they weren't
Well, just to
before.
be clear, AIPAC almost never talks about Israel in any of their advertising. They poll and they figure out what the voters want and they give them. So in that way, the voters are getting what they're asking for because they poll and they do focus groups and they find out what the hot topics are. So, both on the positive and the negative, you can look at the Laura Fine positive ads. That's what Democratic primary voters want. And it just, the only thing is the little disclaimer at the bottom, right? But other than that, they're good ads that are what Democratic primary voters want. So a little bit, there's a symbiotic relationship here. AIPAC and a lot of the crypto PACs and the AI PACs are the same way. They never talk about their issue. They talk about whatever they think will move voters, positive or negative.
And these local races have become nationalized.
Well, I have a very good example going back to my 7th congressional district because Fair Shake, remember the pro-crypto group, is taking out negative ads against LaShawn Ford because of charges that he had some years ago that were negotiated out and dropped. But they don't tell you the charges were dropped. They tell you what the charges were. They make you think he's corrupt because of what happened in the past. They don't tell you how it was dropped down to a misdemeanor and they had overcharged. Whatever the details are, they just want to add him as corrupt because they don't think he's a friend of crypto. And they think Melissa Conyers-Irvin, who he's running against, is their friend. But they don't say, vote for Melissa, she's a friend of crypto, because we're not going to vote for her.
There's nothing there saying crypto bets.
That's right. And at the same time, in a state Senate race I'm aware of, and I'm not going to call it out because you'll see why in a minute, there are ads that are funded by, and I don't remember if it's the crypto or AIPAC, but one or the other, picked up pro ads for a candidate who is not on their side in any way, who doesn't know why they're supporting them, but now the opponent is saying, look, he's backed by this PAC, you can't vote for him. He doesn't know why that PAC backed him, but now he's become self-defensive about, no, I don't take their money, I'm not on the crypto side, if that's who it is, and I think it is. I don't know why they're backed, but then you're, what do we say, when you're splaining, you're not gaining, and he's
When did
stuck.
when did you start beating your
That's
wife,
right.
right?
That's
It's
right.
like you're
So-
in a position where you can't really communicate.
Right. So you can't trust any of the PAC ads, basically. Do we go back to old-fashioned, pen and paper and do our research and decide based on the candidate's history? That's a lot of work. I'm not sure voters are doing that. How do we as voters, to me, our ultimate goal is to negate the impact of the money. That is, I'd like to think that if they keep spending their money, they'll do what Elon Musk did after Wisconsin, to say, never mind, I'm not investing in this state anymore. They don't want me. I'm taking my money away, basically. My version of what he said. So can we dilute the impact of PACs? How long will they keep spending money if they keep losing? Can we counter them by ignoring them, by doing the opposite of what they say? This is like a mind game.
I think you still have to call out the process and how poisonous it is. And look, it may be tomorrow that AIPAC wins 3 out of 4 of these congressional races, but I would argue that even if they win 3 out of 4 of them, they've already lost. They've destroyed the brand. Brad Schneider said, who's a very pro-Israel guy, right? Very much an AIPAC-aligned guy. He said, the AIPAC that I worked with, they had 2 kinds of people in Congress, friends and future friends. They were into bipartisanship. They were into, the subtlety. You can be this far okay on Israel and not okay on that. This AIPAC has now been completely BBized, where it is you are 100% down the line, no matter what Israel does in Gaza or the West Bank or Iran or anywhere or Lebanon or anywhere else. They can do no wrong. You have to give them a blank check. And that's the only way you get AIPAC support now, which seems kind of crazy in a world where, they are heading in the direction of becoming the National Rifle Association that is a wholly owned subsidiary of the Republican Party. And I think if this is a wave election, which it appears to be, and the House is Democratic, fingers crossed, maybe even the Senate is Democratic, I wouldn't want to be working for AIPAC in that atmosphere because they're all going to say, don't even come talk to me. because you are so toxic.
The brand is toxic.
Well, and to your point, like even before this whole conversation about AIPAC started in Illinois, in the 9th District, a majority of Democratic primary voters had a negative view of AIPAC. And about 40% of them had a very negative view. Now, that's probably the highest percentage of postgraduate degrees of any electorate in the world. But it's just saying where our party is going in terms of that brand.
Let's shift a little bit and talk more specifics now. Pete, a moment ago you said something a bit provocative, that this was the
Me?
field of the
What's
Senate.
provocative? I was like, oh man, I made a face.
About the field of Senate candidates being the weakest you've ever seen. So thinking about that race for a moment, what is the narrative of that race, and how do you see things playing out?
Well, you have boring, uninspiring Raja Krishnamurthy, who raised a lot of money, and kind of substanceless Juliana Stratton, and Robin Kelly, who compared to those two, actually has some congressional bona fides, but like a lot of members of the Congressional Black Caucus, has trouble raising money. And so you end up, I mean, Robin's done real things on gun violence. She's done, I thought her motion to impeach Noam was brilliant, and the whole caucus got behind her. That doesn't happen by accident. Getting a whole caucus, which is, our Democrats are like herding cats, to get behind that, I think shows that Robin knows how to work in Congress. She's probably going to finish third. And it just, there's so many other talented politicians. You think about somebody like Cam Buckner, who has gotten all this legislation passed, who I think is terrific, but Camp doesn't have access to money. Representative Delgado, who, along with Ron Villavalum, got the transportation bill through, which took 3 years, and a lot of arm twisting and pleading and trying to figure out all the caucus, all the politics out in the suburbs. Why don't we have people like that running? And there might be 2 or 3 candidates running for Congress in the 9th that would be better Senate candidates or better senators than what we got. And it's just, I don't know how we got here.
So how does a voter have a strategy? Is there a way to use the power that we have as voters to counter some of this? I mean, we're not organized in that way. I am a proponent of ranked choice voting, and if you haven't seen my op-ed in the Tribune, go back and look and you'll see why. But the main reason is this, that the voters don't have a real choice and the candidates don't have a real choice. You have 13 candidates. If we think we need a new generation of candidates, and a lot of us do think it's time for the old-timers to step aside, new people run, but they're in a field of 10, 15, 19 candidates. They don't have a chance. They cancel each other out. They get discouraged. So how do we clean up this process so that the voters feel they have a legitimate say, and so new people want to run? As you said, we can't get good candidates to run. I think I understand why.
I didn't follow the New York City mayor's race as closely as I've followed everything, but I think there is something in the Mamdani model, which, there's a lot of horrible things about social media, and what it does to our kids in particular is a real problem. And, people are talking, Rahm Emanuel, he's even talking about doing what Australia did and banning it for kids under 16. But that is a vehicle where you can tell stories that doesn't cost any money. And the Mamdani campaign did so many things that just made him interesting, and he had a way of communicating that it all just was a synergy, and there were a lot of just normal people who told their stories on social media and who, boosted other people's stories in doing that. And that feels like that kind of, door-to-door is kind of dead. Nobody wants to answer their door. Nobody wants to go door-to-door. But everybody can influence an election on Substack, on TikTok, on whatever platform you want to be on. And if we, as a movement and as a party, can do a better job of organizing and messaging through, the campaigns have changed so much in the last 4 years, I feel like kind of a dinosaur. And that is really the way to do it, is to move around all the paid stuff and have genuine not paid influencers, but genuine people coming up and telling their story about why they're running or telling their story about why they're supporting someone. That stuff matters in little bitty bits, but when you get 10, 15, 20,000 people together virtually on the internet, that's probably the only way to beat the money.
Is that the opening salvo to discuss the 9th?
Well, I was just going to say, we're talking about the impact of social media. Kat Abou-Ghazaleh, hope I'm saying that right. I think I did. Abou-Ghazaleh. The fact that she's competitive in this race kind of speaks to that kind of Zoran strategy. She didn't run the exact playbook, I would say, but she has relied so heavily on digital and social. The fact that someone like her can just didn't have much name recognition at all and comes into the race and is poised to maybe finish second, maybe finish third, but in a crowded field.
And maybe win.
Maybe even win potentially, That really speaks to people are finding other ways to get their message across. I love that you brought up the storytelling that Zoran does. His campaign was so uniquely New York and so authentic to what makes New York what it is, and that's the people who live there. And what I liked most about his campaign was he would just have videos where he's just talking to people. Chatting.
And I think that's the future, and I think that's how you can negate the power of moneyed interest.
Yeah.
The problem with Kat is, unlike Mandami, who is authentic, she is about as inauthentic as it gets. She isn't from here. I'm a poor Chicagoan. No, you grew up in a $3 million McMansion in Dallas, and you were a Republican. So there's an authenticity problem that if she doesn't win, that'll be the problem. In fact, I saw a lot of the polling, and before anybody laid a glove on Kat or ever said anything negative about her, a third of Democratic primary voters in the 9th district decided they didn't like her. So there's an amazing story about the infrastructure and raising all the money nationally and doing this thing, but she did her thing and people went, no, thank you.
Well, Daniel Biss has had an interesting trajectory, too. I mean, 10 years ago, he was the insurgent progressive candidate running for governor, and now he's the establishment candidate endorsed by the outgoing congresswoman. So how do you compare Kat's story
a
to
very progressive congresswoman, I would say.
For sure.
Yes.
No
and
shade
still a
on
very
Jen.
progressive mayor of Evanston.
But established,
Right.
if not establishment.
Well, you hang around long enough and they'll hang a tag on you. But I think Daniel will be a progressive force in Congress if he wins, because if you look at his record in the State House and as mayor, particularly as mayor of Evanston, I mean, the strongest municipal building code in the entire state, where they are actually going to go to zero emissions, is in Evanston, Illinois. No other city. And there were a bunch of very powerful interests, including Northwestern University, which has lots of money and lots of influence in Evanston, that tried to get him to back off and just change one little word, which would have completely canned the ordinance, and Daniel stood his ground. So it's easy to label folks, and it's harder to communicate those, like the things that Cam Buckner does, or the things that a lot of these legislators have done, which aren't glamorous and take a lot of time and take a lot of effort to actually pass something, when you can be Kat and just say, oh, I'm a fighter and I got thrown over at Bridgeview, and you run your TV ad and everybody goes, oh, isn't that wonderful? No one ever did anything because they went on a podcast. Okay? That's great. Go out and march in the streets. You got to do that. But if you can't get into a legislature and get something passed, don't run.
And I think the doubts around Kat, it makes the Mike Simmons conversation interesting. It makes the Laura Fine conversation interesting. Like there's some other candidates there that they don't have a lot of those kind of authenticity issues. If Mike Simmons has the opposite of that. The guy, he's pretty authentic. I'm very curious how someone like him finishes in all this. Can he play spoiler, and who is that too? But your points about Kat and her authenticity, I mean, yeah. That's been a big thing with this campaign overall.
Laura Fine is probably Exhibit A on the impact of APAC.
The APAC
She
thing,
did
yeah.
not have a good answer for that. She's done great work in the state legislature. To your point, a little complex, but I know that I've interviewed her on CPT several times. Her housing reform bills were great. And 5 years ago, I mean, she was out in front on the housing issue and a lot of others. But when it came to what about APAC, she gave a weak response about causation
Yeah.
and didn't just denounce PACs
I
as a
can't
bad
help but feel like in
impact.
those forums where having the bad response with the APAC money, I think that has become such a tone and tenor. The sign, yeah, when people can visually see it,
Yeah.
I think that's
Not
gone
much room for
around.
nuance.
Yeah, that's broken through in a sense,
Yeah.
beyond just
Yeah.
the typical election conversation.
It's too bad. That's a sad race.
But that's
I mean,
also been the way it's been for the Danny Davis seat race. Melissa Conyers-Irvin discussion around APAC. She hasn't had great responses around that discussion either. And so you have some infighting happening in a very crowded field over there for who's going to take that mantle. I still think she's in a decent position to win that race. But the APAC conversation has definitely impacted, I think, some of her millennial support, some of her younger support. The key impact obviously is going to be turnout when it comes to that. And so far, turnout looking, it could be a tick higher than it was in 2022 right now, which I think is very interesting. Very curious what that's going to look like.
just to underscore again the impact of this APAC
Yeah.
influence, it's not that Conyers Irving has a track record of being, let me just say, corrupt in her city offices when she sent her staff out to pick up her dry cleaning, when she you could wear blue jeans today, but you have to pay, and I get the money, and I'm going to do something with it and not tell you what it is. Like, if you look at her history, she is not a good candidate based on her own track record. But that didn't get traction. APAC is having more traction than the actual mistakes that she made
Yeah.
as a public
Well,
office.
this is one of the
public official.
unknowns about both the 7th and the 2nd. We know in the 9th district, APAC is driving the conversation,
Yeah.
and mostly negatively. I don't know
Yeah,
whether that's the case in 2 or 7,
that's exactly it.
Is it,
or even 8.
And I think part of that's the makeup of those electorates.
Totally.
if it's not APAC, is it crypto?
I don't know. I think the
I don't
makeup of
think
those
so.
electorates, they may not care as much. They may not be
Yeah.
that big of a factor. You know what I'm saying? Someone like Melissa Conyers-Irvin has built up community credibility,
Yes.
right? She's in the neighborhood. She's in the streets. People feel like they know her.
Oh, and they voted for her.
And they voted for her, right?
Right.
They've supported
I know,
her in
and I'm
past
not voting
campaigns.
for
That's
her.
what I'm saying. I think when you talk with older black voters and middle-aged black voters, are they talking about APAC? I don't think they care at all. I can't speak for all of them, but that's not a conversation in those communities. It's the younger voters that I'm wondering about, and that's where the turnout thing. That's why I'm looking at that, because amongst millennials and the Gen Z, that APAC conversation is big. But do they show up in force enough for that to really hurt a Melissa Conyers-Irvin in the end and elevate someone like a LaShawn Ford?
Yeah. Well,
Well, I was just going to say, we're talking about LaShawn Ford as if he isn't the incumbent endorsed candidate. And there was a time when that would have just been a foregone conclusion, and that's not the case now.
Danny Davis came right out of the box to back him as his heir apparent. Yeah.
Ford very well could win. That's a race I was talking to you earlier about this. That's been the hardest race for me to really pin down who is taking it. Partially because the field is just so vast.
13, I believe,
Ugh.
if I count. We have 6 progressives. Those of us in that district are pretty frustrated that they couldn't coalesce.
Mm-hmm.
They're all great. They're all good, well-meaning candidates with various things to bring to it. But how do they think that's going to turn
But
out?
You have a lot of the same dynamic in the 8th, where you've got several progressive candidates or people trying to be in that lane. You have several candidates who come from the South Asian community, and Raja came from there. And so if those lanes are crowded, then you got Melissa Bean over here, who's sort of the Nancy Pelosi, I voted for Obamacare even though I knew it was going to cost me my seat, woman, and she's got her own lane, and there's been more money spent for her both by her campaign and by the outside groups like APAC. Seems like she's going to win that because you had all this noise on the other side and all these divided up, slices of vote.
And speaking of name recognition, are we seeing the same thing in the second, where Jesse Jackson Jr. is trying to come back, talk about corruption? He went to jail for it, and yet he seems to be poised to win his seat back, right?
Yeah. I think Junior is in a good spot. I think part of that's been the Donna Miller conversation around APAC, and that is an area that does have a lot of younger voters who do seem to care. Now here's the thing, and this is why I'm looking forward to seeing what happens tomorrow. Are these people just showing up and making noise, and are they actually going to put the noise into the ballot box? Or is it just noise, right? But there's been a lot of noise, and it's anti-Donna Miller on the AIPAC side. And then, Jackson Jr.'s had a lot of good opportunity to capture media moments, obviously with the passing of his father. And you still have a contingent of black Chicagoans and black suburban Chicagoans who like the idea of the Jackson legacy continuing in Congress. So I think Jackson Jr.'s got a really good shot here.
It is interesting. The Miller campaign did put out their polling early on, and it was very clear. Everybody knew Jesse Jackson Jr. Everybody had an opinion.
Yeah.
Half of them, it was unfavorable. Just not going to vote for him under any circumstance. Among the 40-some-odd% that were favorable, only 24 were voting for him. So there was a hunger for somebody else, and when you read the little paragraph about Donna Miller, she went shooting ahead. And I think before Jesse Jackson Sr. passed, I think Donna Miller was going to win that race.
And she's your client. We
And
wanna
she
be
is our
clear.
client.
We want to be
Now,
clear.
the thing that's unmeasurable, you could run every poll you want. You could do focus groups. No one can guess what the nostalgia or
Yeah.
sympathy or however you want to describe
It's unmeasurable.
the Jackson vote. And there's only one way to measure it. We're going to find out tomorrow.
And I do want to be clear, Indivisible Chicago, Indivisible National, for that matter, is endorsing Robert Peters in that race. We've had him here on the show, and he's been very supportive of a lot of progressive values. He's not polling particularly strongly in that mostly two-way race, but couldn't he come up through the middle if people are getting tired of the whiplash between Miller and Jackson?
All things are possible.
I mean, he's a guy he's been building for a while now, and he's a well-liked person amongst electeds, amongst people, his constituents. I'm actually kind of surprised it has been that way for him, so far with the polling. But like I said, anything can happen. The Jackson legacy, he got a lot of news clips and a lot of opportunity to get out there in a way that Donna Miller, can't quite capture. So yeah, we just got to see.
The thing that is probably Donna Miller's whole card is the makeup of the electorate.
Yeah.
It is unlike the 7th, which is no longer a majority black district. The 2nd is solidly majority black district in the primary for sure, and by a margin of 60-40, women to men who actually show up and vote. And so there is, I want a strong black woman as my member of Congress. And that's who Robin Kelly was. And there's a certain affinity, especially voters in the south suburbs who are less sort of Hyde Parky Chicago people. They're, I think, more looking for that brand. So we'll see.
You got me thinking.
Yeah, really. Your job, really, by the end of this show, when we don't have very many minutes left, is to help me make up my mind how to vote.
I
And
still gotta
you're
vote
not doing
tomorrow,
a very- You're not doing a very good job, I'm
Right.
going to say, but you're doing your best. I appreciate your trying. I want to talk just for like a quick 60-second about the Cook County Board President, Toni Preckwinkle. It's getting on in years, but she's been a steady hand at the county board. Brendan Riley is running against her. There's a ton of PAC money in that race too, although I didn't write down the details of that, so I can't share them, but you might know them. But there was a whole lot of ads, a whole lot of ugly ads on both sides in that race. Does Riley really have a chance? Preckwinkle's a pretty solid
It
candidate.
feels like Brendan Riley is running in a Cook County that was 20 years ago. And it just doesn't feel like there's any there.
He's
there.
running
I
a Paul
think
Vallis race.
very much so, and we saw how that all worked. So I think Tony wins. There's some poll floating around says she's up 10. So I believe that.
Yeah.
Now that even in the face of how horrible the property tax reassessment has been, how horrible the whole mess with the computers were that put everything back. Despite a lot of the dysfunction, I just don't think Brendan Riley's made the case. And I don't think you look at Brendan Riley and say, that's a guy I want to be for, because he just is such a throwback.
Yeah, the biggest head scratcher for me is going to be just this conservative Democrat, business capitalist Democrat coalition that Brendan Riley is a part of, and the Vallis coalition in a sense. How powerful are they? It doesn't seem yet that they've coalesced enough power and support, especially with the demographics they would need to win and beat a Tony Preckwinkle. Tony Preckwinkle is an institution on the south side of Chicago, right? I mean, that's a tough out. I think it's still going to be a close race, but I do think that
It always
Tony's
feels
got a
like
good shot.
in Chicago, if you can marry black votes and progressive votes, you win.
Yeah.
That's what Brandon Johnson did. That's what Tony's always done in her races. It's what Barack Obama did. Remember, the
Right.
first time he ran in the Senate race, you had Jesse Jackson Jr. and Jan Schakowsky in his ads.
Yeah.
And that was the coalition.
Right.
And that's going to be the key for any, of those, I don't know what the term would be for that level of Democrat, centrist Democrat, capitalist Democrat, to win any of these elections. Like we look at the mayor's race coming up soon, you got to build a coalition that expands beyond rich white guys who are frustrated about the cities. Oh, it's not the way it used to be.
And I was going to say, if anyone can build that coalition that Riley's still trying to do, that Vallis failed to do, it might be Conway, who at least is a younger, fresher face, and my alderman, and frankly, a much better alderman than people might
That's
have
a whole
expected
nother
he
discussion.
would
We were having a chat
It is-
about that earlier. Yeah.
But
You
there's
do the
one
mayor's
other-
race in 3 minutes.
Yeah, we're
You're
gonna
gonna say no.
We're
Early
gonna do
mayor's
that in a
preview.
minute. I would love a 30-second response about the assessor race, because Fritz K., you talked about property tax assessments. Riley wants to hang that on Preckwinkle, but she doesn't really have a lot to do with that. Cahey has been realigning assessments in a lot of factors. The downtown commercial district is a much smaller base than it used to be. A lot of those buildings are turning residential. You're not getting the same kind of taxes. The tax burden is shifting to residential, unfortunately, predominantly in black neighborhoods in the south and west sides. Enter Pat Hines, who's got his roots in the old Chicago machine because his Uncle Tom, I hate to say that, but his uncle's name was Tom, right? I didn't mean it any other way. Was a longtime assessor and party regular committeeman and part of the original Daily Machine. So does Cahey have to worry?
I think Hines wins that, but I have not followed it at all, but there's just that anger about the property tax bills,
Everybody's mad.
the reassessment, and then the property tax mess with the computers. That anger has to land somewhere. And there's been a lot of conversation about it in the president's race, which I still think Tony wins. I think that anger's got to fall somewhere, and it might be in the assessor's race.
Everyday people, my friends who don't follow politics at all, for the first time in my life, I hear them say Fritz Cahey's name, and it's not in a positive way. People are animated and upset about these property taxes, and it's looking like it might not go well for them.
Well, they're not going to like Hines, who takes all the money from tax appeal lawyers, but
Yeah.
we're going to be back in the same place we used to be with the assessor. It's too bad. In my take, the reassessment and realignment of assessments fell on him. He was maybe the right guy at a wrong time. But he did what needed to be done, and it was painful. That's my take. But I get nobody's going to look too deep at that race. They're going to want to get the current guy out.
Taxes go up or not. Sometimes it's
right.
as simple as the message as it goes sometimes. you know?
Right. Oh, and we didn't even talk about the Illinois controller.
Oh, there's so much to talk about, and we're out of time. Will you come back in a month or two, and we can start up with the mayor's race with municipal elections? How's that
Yeah,
sound?
as long as you don't replay this tape of what we said, who was going to win what, because there's no way I'm right about half
Well,
of these.
We could be wrong all across the board.
You can listen to WCPT next Sunday at
Yeah, Jones
7
got
o'clock.
me on tomorrow and Wednesday, which is a total trap.
One other thing we wanted to mention, we mentioned the Wisconsin judges earlier today. There are judges in Illinois too, and a long list of them. Lots of places to go to for advice about who to vote for with judges. One is Injustice Watch, And we have some materials out on where you checked in. If you'd like to take that and get some advice about judges, I always need it. I never
And
know who
what
those
they
folks are.
do is they compile the results of all the bar associations. You'll get that same list from the Chicago Council of Lawyers, which is the Injustice Watch list, and you can decide. It gives you the LGBTQ, the Black Women Bar Association, all the specific associations. And for me, if anyone doesn't like a candidate, I'll vote no, and you can take this small newspaper that's out there from Injustice Watch into the booth with you, and I would urge you to do that. We also want to be
Listen to
sure
it.
that you know that No Kings 3 is March 28th.
Everybody knows, right?
This is going to
We'll
be
be
the
there?
biggest yet. It has to be. It's going to be an anti-war protest as well as an anti-dictator/king protest. Grant Park, 1:30, March 28th.
Just some quick credits, and then we can go out to the bar for our Q&A. Show Up Chicago is hosted by Blue Beginning chapter of Indivisible Chicago, as well as our friends here at the Hideout Inn. If you or your friends who aren't here tonight want to watch this show and grade our guests on their predictions, you can go to YouTube and search for Blue Beginning, or also listen to WCPT at 7 o'clock next Sunday. Tonight's sound engineer at the Hideout was Kiefer Douglas. Thank you, Kiefer. John Freeberg manages our broadcasting and our recording. Thanks to Lewis University for additional tech support. Thanks to the Blue Beginning team, which includes Marge and me and Chloe Madvig and Maureen Cool and Nick Rabkin and Mike Lenahan, none of whom are here tonight. It's Marge and I running the entire show by ourselves. So.
And happy to do it.
And you anticipated my next request. One more big round of applause for our guests, Pete Giangreco and Brandon Pope. Thank you very much.